Oh, I got it. I got it, left.
I just sent myself a link.
I can see you now. It's the same link.
No, it's a different live stream link, so I have to work really, really fast right now to share it with everybody.
It's on about a 30-second delay. Do you want me to block this for a second since it's showing your inbox left?
Sure, yes.
I just wanted to say hi.
How are you?
Good.
Good to see you.
You're involved, anyway.
I'm just trying to help.
There's a new link for this?
There is, and I'm attaching everybody on the Twitter.
Go to left. Is YouTube. So search for Lev Polyakov on YouTube, and then it comes up. Is it Theo?
All right, here we go. That is Theo.
Hi, Theo.
Okay.
Welcome to the National Arts Club.
Thank you.
We haven't heard you yet.
You should be able to hear me.
Go. We got Theo on board.
Yay.
Test.
Let's just talk, and then it starts as everybody's over here.
All right, I'm gonna go sit down.
All right.
So shall we take our seats?
Yes, now it's time for all the models. Sorry for the long time here, but we have to set everything up. Here is the broadcast. We're broadcasting.
Okay. Are you ready to go?
Is it broadcasting already?
It is broadcasting
Can we
already.
share it on the telephone?
Sure, absolutely.
We want our people to.
Yes, people must see. Okay, I got all the windows ready here.
Maybe you can email it me and like
Oh, sure.
text it to me or post it.
I wish I could do that, but I just got to set this final thing up right now. That's the, no problem at all. So, okay, Jessica, here we go. Okay, so, here's the link. There we go. Thank you. Yes.
Everybody, may I have your attention? We are about to start in about 2 or 3 minutes. I'm just going to take this laptop and try to lift it up here. If I'm not going to be able to do that, then I'm going to go Hunchback Notre Dame mode and change settings around when people are going to be previewing things. But let me try to do that, and then we're going to start. So far,
So good. I do. It's right over there. Perfect. That's better. Like that. Oh, it's not going to slide off. It's in there. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I think that works.
All right, panel, it's time to take the seats.
Sorry, let's do this.
No worries at all. It must be done.
It must be done.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new event from the wonderful Art and Technology Committee of the National Arts Club. My name is Lev Polyakov, and I will be your host for the evening, and I'm the new chair of this committee. So today we're going to talk about memes, what memes are, how they relate to the art world and blockchain and all that good stuff. But first, I would like to have Isabel Draves go up here and talk a little bit about the event she has coming up.
Thanks, Lev. So nice that I get to open this whole incredible event by talking about another event that's happening in just under a month. So as part of Creative Tech Week, which is our 10-day festival that happens between May 3rd and May 12th, one of our events is called Crypto Creative. And it starts at 2 p.m. and it goes until midnight. So you can come only for the evening portion and then catch a couple of panels and our DJ and live music. But if you come for the discussion part of the day, the intention is to have a really deep dive kind of conversation. Not as much this kind of setup as panelists and audience, but more like a circle of conversation with the experts at the front, but everybody participating. And we're going to cover some of the biggest questions about how the blockchain is going to impact art, music, creativity, and media. Everything from trading cards to provenance to smart contracts for royalties for music, and musicians and artists tokenizing, doing their own personal ICOs, probably some of the topics that we'll also talk about today. So you can go to Eventbrite and type in Crypto Creative. You will see our event on Thursday, May 10th. Thank you so much. Excellent.
Thank you so much, Isabel. So we have a wonderful panel here this evening. To the rightest of the right over here, we have my good friend Lewis Parker. Next we have Wiley Matthews. Next we have Judy Mem. And finally we have Jessica Angel. So I'd like to take the opportunity for each panelist to give a short description of who they are and what they do and all that stuff. And we're going to be putting some images here as well. So let's start with Lewis and go down. Oh, I forgot to mention Theo. We have Theo Goodman, who is online over here. So there we go. So I'm going to make sure to press the right button in order for Theo to be seen. I always forget the people who are on live stream. This is the second time I forgot, but I'm going to pay for that in some way in the future. Who knows, karmically speaking. So anyway, let's give it to Lewis, and Theo will be the last. Oh, yeah, we have a mic. Do you want me to do the Yes. So I'm going to load up. Here you go. There we go, Lewis. All right, this is a tiny thing, so here we go. Okay. If it's not on, I'll give you mine. Can you hear me? Here we go.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Lewis, and my primary interest lies in the expression of memes, how humans create memes, how they connect us as a species, and also in the blockchain, how that also connects us, and the interface of two things. And here's an image which usually if you see this in some sort of pitch, you should run away it's a generic node connecting image, but I think it's pretty relevant to kind of visualize how memes are connecting the human network. Ideas, and I define memes as the simplest unit of culture or the simplest unit of an idea. So you can think about it like quantified, meaningful information. So all of this social media and all this technology connecting us today, they're channels for the bandwidth of human memes to cross-connect the nodes and have information passed around humans faster than it ever has before.
If the clicker's not working, I'm going to do it for you.
So, yes, this next image represents how we are totally inundated in what is called the noosphere, or the sphere of information, memes, ideas, and meaning that surrounds us at all points of our lives. And the information we intake makes up who we are as individuals and really does define us. And here's an example of what I would call a holistic meme, or a meme that can stand on its own two legs. So, for example, there doesn't need to be kind of a central agenda supporting this meme. It just has enough inherent value that humans would pass it along from, to one another. And so I would consider this a natural meme, as opposed to, this is more a propagandized meme. So it's kind of a weaponized meme using to hijack your neurophysiology to essentially mind control you to perform a certain action. And so kind of generally, as we understand these information technologies and build them, we want to get away from these kinds of memes that are trying to force us to specific actions, and more towards the previous kind of meme, which is a natural expression of human creativity. And a big problem with information systems today is that the tools of propaganda are highly controlled by an elite group of people, meaning that you can have a huge amount of leverage in the noosphere, the memes that we ingest with a small amount of people can have a large amount of leverage, and that's because there's really no cost to disseminate targeted information, right? So the market is a tool to add scarcity to the ability to disseminate information, right? Because in any buy or sell in the market, you need to back that up with capital, which is a resource that's universally scarce for each person. So if we combine markets with information propagation, we're adding a mechanism to discern more truth from information itself. So this is kind of like the goal here is to become kind of like enlightened users of market-powered information, so that we know the memes and the information that we're getting all have at least been vetted for truth and have not been projected to us in a weaponized manner. So that leads into my project, Archetype, and essentially we're a platform that anyone can go on the blockchain, create their own meme tokens that are secured by decentralized networks, and create markets for their own information. And so we're using Ethereum as the tokenization layer and IPFS as the data storage layer for the developers. And essentially, yeah, this is how it works. Creating decentralized markets for information, kind of rocket-powered free speech. And if people agree with it, they will consume it by buying shares in that information, and the market will rise. Pretty much similar to how any market already works today. But decentralizing that power to any type of content creator. If you're an artist, if you make memes, singer-songwriter, a WikiLeaks, for instance, any type of information that humans find valuable, now they can back that up with a market mechanism as well. And yeah, on top of that, we'll create whole new industries of curators and just entire new platforms of meaningful information transfer. I think this is going to bring up a whole many new industries. And yeah, the goal here is to just empower individual content creators with mechanisms to get directly rewarded for providing humanity with good information. That could be an artist, people who make memes, anything. But we want pure good creators. We want their information to get out there. And at the same time, we want to be less affected by information that is, targeted for us to perform a specific action that's not in our full well-being.
All right, let's go to Wiley, and I'm going to load up Honeycomb.
Hey guys, my name's Wiley Matthews. I've been in the digital media space for about 20 years now. Originally was one of the first folks to do SMS-based content, and I guess we were some of the first to put content on mobile devices and to make it shareable. And it's been a passion of mine, just art in general, for my whole life. I got into blockchain and crypto about 1.5 years ago as a means of looking for another expression of a lot of the work that I've done for most of my career. And I created a incubation accelerator called Honeycomb Ventures. And so we've done a lot of work with early stage projects, a lot of media and entertainment focus, but also in the area of data. And what I'm really most interested in these days is how we're validating a lot of the information that's coming across our desks and how we're able to really discern fact from fiction. And I'm an advisor on a project called Tribe, which is a blockchain project that's aimed to solve for fake news by creating a series of layers of validation between the network and the participants and the contributors to the news itself, the writers of the news. So it's a system of reputation. It's a system of basically a community based checks and balances for governing the whole platform. But I've also been involved in a lot of data rights management startups recently, and how we protect our personal identity and how we're able to be marketed to, but in a more permissioned way. I think it's really important. And the way that we share content these days, I don't know how many people in this room, how many people in this room have actually clicked on a banner ad in the past year? Anyone? Right? Okay. All right, so it's a pretty low number. We're marketed to in lots of different ways. Content marketing has become more prevalent, and one of the things that brands do is they use persuasion as a means of just creating an affinity, and so memes are an important aspect of that, and where I see blockchain really playing into this is really more about how we're validating. If we go back to that first slide that you had of the network model, and we think about how information is disseminated across Twitter, across these social platforms. What's happening today is a lot of that information is actually being passed around by bots that are generated basically by rogue actors, nation states, things of that nature. And so the ability to get these things out into a larger mass audience is really based around the scale of these bots, and so we see that in advertising. A lot of the advertising today has fraud that is using these same types of tactics, and so blockchain has the potential of creating a bit of a trust in terms of like, who are you? Can I trust you? Is this information relevant? And that the provenance of where it comes from or the validity of it are things that could be better checked, and I think that are just checked at all, because these days it just flies around. I see my mom and aunt posting stuff on Facebook. I'm like, no, this is fake news. I have to do that all the time. I'm sure you guys have experienced the same thing. So what I'm really interested in is a dialogue around how we can build better systems to make sure the right information is getting out, and also bringing trust back into the internet, because I feel like when we're talking about memes, we're really talking about these expressions of cultural information. That I think that the term meme goes back into the 70s, I believe. So it's like, this idea that, you can have these persuasive images or sound bites or whatever they may be, that then start to create the narrative of the culture and start to be the vernacular of the culture. And so I think it's really important to protect that, the validity of that. And I think that's really where blockchain can help. So thanks.
Thank you, Wiley. Now, Judy, I'm going to load up your PDF.
Hello, hello. Hello, hello. Okay. So my name is Judy Mam. I am the co-founder of Dada.nyc, which is a social network where people communicate to each other through drawings. Can we see the?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'll tell you a little bit about it. So the next slide, please.
Do you have the clicker, by the
Yeah.
way? Does it,
I do?
it should work. Let's see.
if it works. The
Let's see if it
clicker needed, okay. Dada was the brainchild of Beatriz Elena Ramos, who you can see in the picture. She is an artist and entrepreneur. She moved to the United States several years ago. She was working for MTV, for Disney, for Nickelodeon. Then she opened her own animation studio, and which is how I met her, because I used to be a creative director in advertising, and I used to be one of her clients. She worked for some of the biggest brands in the world, and at some point she noticed that even though she was a very successful artist, number one, she didn't own any of the intellectual property of content that she had helped these brands create. And number two, she only made a tiny fraction of the billions of dollars in value that she also helped create for these brands. So we got together, we felt that this needed to change for artists. Together with our CTO, Abraham Milano, who is in the audience today, we got together and we felt that artists need to be better remunerated and remunerated more fairly. So we were...
If it doesn't work, I'll do it for you.
Do it. Your finger is going to be better. So we were inspired by the Dadaist movement at the turn of the 20th century. That's why we call it Dada. The Dadaists were basically broke with all the established notions of what was art, who could do art, how it was supposed to be perceived. They were all about experimentation and collaboration and freedom of self-expression, and they were our inspiration. Next slide, please. And so basically, at the beginning, Dada wanted to be like a community for artists to be discovered by people who wanted to hire them, like Beatriz and me. But then we realized that, what we wanted to know was the artist behind the work. And if people were uploading things to a platform like many portfolio sites, you never really get to know the artist. And also, if you wanted to build a community, we needed to give artists the tools to do what they do best, which is to create. So we basically transformed Dada into a visual conversation platform. So what you see, hold on one second, what you see in this slide is actually a visual conversation taking place between several artists. Each one of the big panels has 5 little panels, and each panel has been created by a different artist. Next slide, please. So that means that when you go into Dada, nothing is uploaded. You go into our platform, you see that this little, orange thing. You can click in it and you can start drawing. We have like a digital canvas, a very basic tool where you can start drawing. You can invite friends to draw with you, or you can respond to another drawing. And that creates, you can go ahead. That creates visual conversations. For instance, this conversation, the first one is a flower that some user in the United States did. The second panel is by an artist in Chile who decided to paint something a little bit different. And then this went on and on to create the story completely spontaneously. Artists from all over the world that had never met each other before. And what we find, it's like this kind of jazz improvisation where like people basically follow the motif and the style of the other person. And we're very proud that being a social network, we are an actively creative platform, which means that it's not the same to swipe or to click or to give a like without really thinking, than to actually create something with your imagination and your concentration and your creativity. When you do that, you have made an amazing effort, and when people see what you responded to them, they respond in kind. And this is why we get stuff like this, if you want to go to the next slide. So this is another one of our conversations, which each one of these little animals has been done by a different artist. Go ahead. So we have right now we have over 160,000 registered users, and about 2% of them have made about 100,000 drawings. And our mission has always been to be able to allow artists to kind of get remunerated from their work. So what we decided to do was, we tried different monetization schemes until we kind of bumped into the blockchain. And so we created a decentralized art marketplace, which I'm going to explain on the blockchain. What the blockchain allows us to do is like, now people can buy in this art gallery that we have online a drawing from Dada that will always be verified, that the artist will always be verified, the intellectual property will always belong to the artist, and the collector who buys the drawing will have verification and proof of ownership. So we launched our first collection in Halloween. We basically took 100 drawings from Dada, 100 creepy or weird drawings. For Halloween, we called it Creeps and Weirdos, and we gave these drawings 5 levels of scarcity. This is something that the blockchain allows you to do. So let's say that you like that drawing, you go into our gallery, you like this drawing is an extremely rare, which means it's one of, like there's only 5 copies of it. Each one of these drawings is a unique digital asset, meaning it's like a crypto coin. You can buy it, and the moment you buy it from Dada, then there's 4 copies left. You are the owner of that 1 copy, and if I want to sell it to Jessica, I can sell it to Jessica, and then it doesn't belong to me anymore, it belongs to Jessica. So this is really a wonderful thing, because we are able to sell the drawings, and you can, collect them and see them on your screen. Now, the Ethereum blockchain in which we are based allows us to do these smart contracts that basically we codify the transactions that cannot be altered. So, for instance, the first sale for the artist gets 70% of the profit, and Dada gets 30% that gets reinvested in the community. But for all subsequent sales, the owner will get 60% of the profit, but the artist will always get 30%, no matter how many times the drawing is sold, and we'll get 10%. And we feel that is a huge game changer for artists. At Dada, people come to draw because of their own personal pleasure. It's not work, it's play. But we feel that through this, we can actually have them, get some value from their wonderful work and their talent. So because of the smart contracts, things like this can happen. I don't know how many of you are aware of CryptoKitties, but CryptoKitties is one of the most successful blockchain projects. Basically, they're digital cats that you can breed. You can have a cat and then breed it with another cat, and you'll get another cat. Now, these cats also, there's these people called, this company called Kitty Hats that are purveyors of accessories for the cats. So the cats can have hats or shoes. And the Kitty Hats people said to us, well, if a cat can have a hat, why couldn't a cat be a collector of art? And we said, well, why couldn't they? So we launched this collection of art masterpieces, the famous art masterpieces, reinterpreted by our own living artist on Dada. And so if you have a CryptoKitty, you can buy a Van Gogh or a Da Vinci or a Rembrandt for your cat. And so, this is starting to get us into the realm of memes, and I'm going to leave the rest of my presentation to the discussion. But at Dada, we believe that memes are also art, and they are art because they are expressive and they are creative. And I would like to discuss that they are, at this point, they are free. And one of the things that I would love to discuss is what is going to happen when, instead of just being free, they start being tokenized and monetized. I think that's a very interesting discussion to have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judy. So now let's load up the second PDF. That's right here.
Hello everyone, my name is Jessica Angel. I'm a visual artist, and I was commissioned to do this art piece by a cryptocurrency startup called TrueBit. I was approached by them in late October last year. I knew a little bit about blockchain, but I wasn't really digging the whole thing. I always felt that blockchain was a little complicated and very technical, so I didn't really dive into blockchain until I was invited to do it. So my previous artwork, which I'm not going to show, I want to talk about this one specific project, but just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea, has to do with creating massive installation pieces that are inspired by the world of bits of information. Like if you could dive into the computer and go sightseeing. So that is the reason why they thought of me. And they said, okay, we would like you to create this art project and let people dive into the blockchain and go sightseeing. TrueBit undertook this massive work. It's called the Doge Ethereum Bridge. It's a programming endeavor of connecting the Dogecoin and the Ethereum blockchains to be able to exchange the coins, the tokens, off-chain, which they told me that. I was like, what are you talking about, right? So they claimed a bounty of a pretty good amount of money for doing this off-chain bridge. And they called me, they said, we would like you to create an art bridge that represents the connection of these two blockchains. So I was like, well, that sounds really interesting. A lot of my work has to do with hyperstructures and space. So I thought, well, why not making a hyperbridge? This is an image of the Doge and the Ethereum logos, and kind of going to memes. This is actually a meme. It's kind of a funny thing, and Dogecoin is kind of a funny coin that brings a lot of attention to the community too. So TrueBit wanted to bring that money from this prize back to the community through art. So this project is showing this connection. So thinking about bridges, I came across this pedestrian bridge inspired by the Mobius band. I thought, very cool, yes, let's make a bridge. But I didn't want to work around a bridge that has two ends because I wanted to talk about unification. I wanted to talk about how these two ends become one. So I thought the Mobius band could be a really interesting starting point. So I created a Klein bottle. The Klein bottle is like the Mobius band, but it's like if you take the sides of the Mobius band and connect them together, you create the Klein bottle. So most of you probably know the Mobius Strip, right? The Mobius Strip is a ring, right, that has half a twist. If you take a full ring and you connect the sides of it, you get a donut. It's called a torus in mathematics, right? If you take the Mobius band and connect the sides, you will get a Klein bottle. So I worked with the Klein bottle and not with the Mobius band because part of this project is not just to create the possibility for people to walk and go inside the blockchain space and the Doge Ethereum bridge and experience it, right? But also to create a platform for other interactions to happen. So this project has many layers. It is a little bit complex. So you can see here two Mobius strips in the art structure. This is a public art piece. It will take place either in the Vancouver Biennale or here in New York City in one of the New York City parks. So the location is still not locked down. But hold on. Each one of these colors represents, yellow is representing obviously Dogecoin and gray is representing Ethereum. And each one of these is a Mobius band in this art structure, 22 feet high, 30 feet wide, 40 feet long. And then these two blocks, two Mobius strips are connected by these windows. And the shape of these windows actually are the shape of this other ring that you see there. It's not a Mobius strip. It's a ring with two twists that connect the two Mobius strips. It's very mathematical, but it's very accurate. So this piece is inspired by mathematics. And then when I was talking about the work with programmers and with the TrueBit team, they were really driven to it because they know a lot about mathematics and we were really excited about it. So that's the reason why we continued with it. So you take one Mobius band and you cut it in the middle into two, and you get to what you find in the white stripe that I showed before. So the whole structure is completely interconnected, and it makes total sense. So this is the structure. You will be able to enter. We are building a public programming that goes inside the structure. We are partnering with Status, which is another crypto project. They are developing a DApp, an application, a decentralized application that they're going to use inside the structure as a way to play around with their technology. So, for example, talking about memes, what their project is to create like a scavenger's hunt game. So you go inside the structure and you're going to be able to find different things across the space. And once you find the clue to one of the questions, you will get a card, or you will get a piece of art, or a meme. So that's the stuff that we're developing. The other layer of the project is building community. Building the community who's actually going to inhabit this space. And this community is certainly artists and people interested in the connection between art and blockchain. So that's one of the projects with Status. So you can have a sense of how the space is going to be inside. This is going to be a little bit like a little museum for blockchain experiments, art and blockchain experiments. So this is an image of an experiment we did at ETH Denver. It's an Ethereum hackathon event for programmers that run on Ethereum in Denver, and they gave us a space for us to test and start playing around between programmers and artists in order to create prototypes that are going to take place inside the Klein bottle. So we managed to gather around 12 people from musicians, a musician, a video projector artist, a muralist, a sculptor, people working on hardware and Arduinos and all these sort of technologies to actually connect the artwork, the physical artwork, to the blockchain. So one of the pieces we created was the mining block. And this actually happened as we were all talking together. So it is a really enriching space that brings collaboration to the table, and it's really vibrant. So this is actually the mining block that we created. Do you want to put press play? I think
it's a PDF though.
But it's gonna.
It is.
If you click on that image.
All right, let's see. Go back here.
This is a silly video, but.
Allow.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Mm-hmm. So part of the idea is to make art be the medium for people to understand blockchain a little bit. Use art as a means to experimentation. So this is the block, and you hit it like if you're mining a block, and then you have to hit it until you earn the reward. So that is going to continue being developed later this month, next month. At the Ethereal Summit, we're going to have another makerspace, second version, to continue developing these prototypes and to continue developing interactions for people to get a connection to the blockchain that is not necessarily technical, but a little bit more sensorial. So this community, it's called Art Project Decentralized. I invite you to check it out. We're on Telegram. And we're having discussions about how we can use art to somehow normalize the use of blockchain too. People ask questions, how is the blockchain being useful for artists? How are artists going to monetize because of the blockchain? But what we want to bring to the table is, how is art going to make the blockchain more accepted? Something like that. So I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Jessica. So now we're going to move on to Theo Goodman, who has been patiently waiting in Hangouts. I see him. There he is. All right, Theo, I'm going to press on your icon, so you're not going to go away.
Hello.
All right, and I'm going to stop screen sharing. Hello,
What's up,
Theo,
everybody?
can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can, but the volume's low. Let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger. Okay. Say something now?
Yes, I'm here. What's up?
What's up?
What's up?
All right. Yeah, I'm a co-founder of the Rare Pepe Foundation. I'm also a rare art auctioneer. Most recently, we did a great auction at the Bitcoin Harvest. Check that out, bitcoin.com. I'm also resident meme consultant at Proof of Work Media, a boutique strategy and creative studio in London. Also an avid shit poster, and I'm getting the art of the drive-by shit post down. So we'll go through a few important slides here. So when speaking about memes, it's not new, actually. Actually, we used to communicate, using pictures. It's not a modern thing. So runes, this is an example of communicating ideas that are not with a standard alphabet that we use today. Because the reason that memes are important is because they communicate faster than the language that we use. They're much faster. They communicate in hyperspeed. This is an example of old Chinese compared with new Chinese writing. You can also see how things have developed over time, where they had, at the beginning, they used more picture style, and then the modern language, it still uses a kind of picture style, but you can see how it's changed. Or hieroglyphics, same thing. So memes are not new. Here's a kind of meme you might have seen before, something like this. This is a good one. How you think you look when you're giving that sexy stare at a girl and how you actually look. But it's not new. This is from 1921 from a magazine called Judge. And this is how you think you look when a flashlight is taken and how you really look. So this is not a new thing. We're actually refinding a lot of these ways of communication that are really effective. Same thing here. You might have seen this picture somewhere on the internet, right? This is maybe the original one from that same magazine, Judge, and it says, "Oh, say, can you see?" as the little thing right there. So this has been going on a while. And here's another example of just a few days ago. I was talking online with some friends, and somebody, so I have to explain, somebody posted on Reddit, this is a picture of Family Feud, Australia, and the headline is, "Name something people might do to make money quickly." Now, it didn't have these two right here. It had gamble, sell things, lotto, work, babysit, and of course, Bitcoin is on there too, right? So we're in this discussion about with Binance, which is an altcoin exchange, and Binance has cut off the affiliates or some of the affiliate earnings. Just to make a long story short, these people have worked as affiliates to get referrals, and Binance basically cut them off. So I entered in, name something you might do to make money quickly. Well, cut off affiliates would be one. And then, of course, I wanted to put one of my own websites in there too, dgenbet.com, because then I'm shilling inside the shilling about a tweet that is about shilling. So you have in this, you have a tweet about affiliates, and in itself, it's a promotion of an affiliate link as well. And I might also be most well known for some of my really dank artwork. This is probably my most well known piece, Eggplant Pepe. Yeah, and also I want to speak about the truth. The reason things are funny is because they're the truth. So that's one of the key ingredients to finding the truth. All right, that's all I got for my introduction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Theo. Yeah, this microphone is loud. All right, panelists, thank you so much for doing what you're doing right now, and now we're going to go into questions. So since my mind is fried, I wrote the questions on my phone. Let me see. Okay. So the first question is about blockchain in general. So how many of you guys out there in the audience know how don't know how blockchain works? All right, that's enough people for Wiley to.
Well, this is a tough place. Just a quick response, but I think that if you really just look at the basics of what the system, compared to the internet that we use today, or the banking systems we use today, or any of the centralized systems we use today, what the blockchain is really an innovation in accounting. It's really the third tier of accounting. Whereas for thousands of years we've used the two-party system. We have one-party system, the abacus, and then we have the two-party system, which is you buy something, they write it down, and they give you a receipt. And this is the third tier. And so the blockchain itself is just one iteration of that. It's arguably the first, but there will be other ones. And what the third tier of accounting really provides is a layer of consensus, right? An understanding that you have this and I have that, without somebody else having to get in the middle and tell us what we both have, which is really what we use today. And you see this in centralized systems in lots of things. It's not just in the way that we conduct business through banking. It's in the way that we connect to the internet. It's in the way that we get healthcare. It's in all of these things. And so all of the glut and sort of bureaucracy that's been the fabric of the world that we live in today, is on the verge of being disrupted by this technology back inside. And so it's making peer-to-peer transactions more seamless and liquid. And so really what we're talking about here is an innovation in accounting, and that hasn't happened in over 1,000 years. And so when the two-party system was invented, that set off a ripple effect throughout the world. So the merchants could hold warehousing, and they could do business in different places, and things, people could produce goods and commodities at a much larger scale. And so exactly what happened then when we invented the two-party system of accounting, this third tier of accounting is set to have that same level of exponential innovation and growth. And so that's really what the blockchain is.
Thank you, Wiley. Does anybody else want to add anything regarding what blockchain is, or are we good? Theo?
What blockchain is?
Or any thoughts before
I did that on purpose.
into the artwork and the memes?
Yeah,
about
blockchain.
This Trinity. Whoa, is everybody okay? Is anybody need a doctor? Okay.
Everyone okay? Yeah, that was not blockchain. Yeah, blockchain is a mechanism that allows for censorship resistance in the first place, and all the other stuff is secondary. So it allows for transparency, and it allows for censorship resistance. Censorship resistance means that nobody can tell you who to transfer value from or when to transfer the value to, and the transactions are irreversible. So I think those are the main things that you need to remember with blockchain, or why you might need blockchain or why you might not need blockchain. Because if you don't want those features, then maybe you don't need blockchain. Maybe you should just use a database.
Thank you, Theo. Let me press this over here. Okay, so now I have a question for the entire panel. If in the future we're going to have different kinds of investors in the art world, not so much like the great Italian families of the Renaissance, like the Medicis, but more of having everybody be a little Medici contributing to certain pieces of artwork, how do you see this being different? I'm going to be very careful not to shock myself, but that's not a good sound. How do you see, thank you. I'm going to turn this stupid mic off. It's not doing a good job. Thank you so much, Jessica. Hello. Okay, this is much better mic. Okay, so what is the difference in using digital currency as we have it right now versus in the future people doing the same thing but with art? That's the question.
What is the difference?
What is the difference between using digital currency versus using memes as digital currency? So in other words, like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, Litecoin versus the Pepe, what was it, the purple vegetable? Eggplant, thank you. Versus using eggplant Pepe to pay for your mortgage.
I would say that there's fundamentally at the core, there's no difference. There's no technical difference on how the system is structured. For example, you could say Bitcoin is an art piece and we're trading shares in like an the world's most successful work of art. Or we could say we're trading, let's say, 1,000 shares of eggplant Pepe as art. But let's say there's 21 million shares of eggplant Pepe and people start using that as a de facto currency within a niche community, then at what point does that bridge the gap from art to currency? So I think as these markets get more mature and more communities adopt memes, art pieces, and things we don't necessarily consider as currencies, but use them as currencies within their communities, it's going to essentially empower decentralized information communities that are organized and are linked by the information itself. Whether it's like, we all own a share in this piece of art, or we all own a share in this idea, and wow, we have an interesting incentive now to propagate this information and this idea and this art piece so that more people, come into our market.
And I say that in our case, it's not so much about whether the art can become a currency. I mean, that's what happens in the art market anyway, But that what the blockchain allows is, for instance, we can sell peer-to-peer art from the people the artists who work in our network to anyone here. That that has Ethereum. You don't have to go through a gallery. You don't have to go through a gatekeeper. You don't have to go through like these structures that exist where like you can become an art collector by sitting in your house in front of your computer and support leading artists and actually support an entire community, an entire marketplace. And that's, I think, also quite revolutionary.
This question makes me think, as an artist, I have actually paid with artwork for things. I have paid with drawings for people to take photographs of my art. I have paid with paintings for things. So it actually seems like it is sort of the same. We artists have that, do that. I feel with the blockchain, it may become a little easier to use the art as a means to pay. You can send it to someone in China, anywhere, and you can, use your art as a currency the same way that artists use art as a barter form, I guess.
I think you can use art as a method of exchanging value, but I think that if you look at Ethereum, there's different types of tokens you can have. You can have the fungible tokens. You can have the non-fungible tokens. I think art is typically looked at as a non-fungible asset. Currency, by definition, sort of requires a fungibility, so that if I give you $1 for that microphone, you could take that same $1 and buy that laptop, and so that the value of it stays consistent. So it actually.
Maybe you can explain fungibility.
Yeah. So I mean, just in the history of how money operates, there's the standard of what we all agree. It's basically the mythology of what we all agree to have value. But being able to actually have something that is then transferable into something that can be bought, that has the purchase power to buy something completely different than what actually you bought it for in the first place. That's really what the core fungibility means. Is that it's agnostic to the transfer of the value. And whereas if you look at art, art is usually represented as one of a kinds, and so the non-fungibility of that. Concert tickets would be non-fungible because it's only that one concert that you would get to see, right? But credits to buy a concert ticket in the future, that could be anything, and so then it could contain some fungible aspects to it. But I think that when we talk about art being a store of value, we're really looking at how we're valuing it based on its scarcity and the fact that it is its own thing. In a lot of ways, people think that Bitcoin is really just a collector's item, right? And that because it's a collector's item, because there's only 21 million of them already made, that's really where it gets its value. So Intrinsic value versus non-intrinsic value is also a thing when we talk about how this affects art. And that's true, really more for art than it is, I think, for other types of, maybe for music or things like that. I think that you'll find that there will be currencies or there will be platforms that allow for people to buy and sell art and music, but it may not be with the coin that they create themselves, but it'll probably be more with a more accepted standard.
So practically speaking today, if I were an artist, and I am an artist, but that's besides the point, if I were an artist and I would want to put my artwork into a state of it becoming money, or into a state where it could be traded for Bitcoins or Dogecoins or whatever, how do I do it? What are today the practical ways to get that done?
But there are platforms that are like inviting artists to, like Rare Art Labs and like, Travis, the Super Rare, where artists are actually, these platforms are hosting these artists, or even, well, Archetype with memes as well, right? You can put your art in there and you can start monetizing directly, or you can sell your art there. I don't think it's about art becoming money. I mean, data is going to issue a token eventually where we're going to incentivize the community to buy the art, and we are going to incentivize artists with this token. In the end, art, yes, is an investment, and art is an investment whether it's digital and rare or whether it's in the analog world. You buy a piece of art now at Dada for a certain amount. Either went up and somebody ended up buying it for far more of its original price, and they may sell it later for far more of its original price. But to answer your question, there are blockchain companies or blockchain-based companies who are hosting or like inviting artists to be part of a community that is kind of curated and incentivized by tokens and like curated registry, so you can get your art out there and get people to buy it.
And Louis, I'm gonna be over here. Louis, what stage right now is Archetype.mx at?
Well, you can go to Archetype.mx and upload your image file and create an actual token on the blockchain that is then transferable with the media hosted on an alternative decentralized network. Right now, we're finishing our decentralized exchange system, so then you'll actually be able to put them onto a marketplace where people can go buy and sell them. But right now, if you go to the website, you can do the test functionality, but that's live on the blockchain.
Theo, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, you should just use Counterparty. It's really cool. Counterparty.io. Yeah, I think everyone's covered a lot of options. There's a lot of options out there for artists to use right now. They all have pros and contras about how you want to do it. There's also a new project called Bitcoins, and people are making art cards on that. So it really depends. I think if you're totally new to blockchain at all, then you should just make a wallet of whatever cryptocurrency, Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever, and just play around with it and just learn what that's all about. And then you'll get the feel for, how it all works and everything. So if you're a total noob, I think that would be the first step before you start trying to do all this stuff with different kinds of tokens and all smart contracts and all that stuff. Just get the basics down, learn how to control your private keys, and maybe track some stuff on the blockchain and see how it works first.
Thank you. So the next question that I have for the whole panel is, in the trinity of art, memes, and blockchain, if we're talking about art versus memes, and I think we've already established that memes are art, there's not really any distinguishing factor there. The distinguishing factor that does exist, though, is internet culture. If we're talking about memes as we currently know them, behind every single image, there is a whole history and a whole lineage that could be traced all the way back to, like, for example, with Skurdo Sparde, who was that weird bear-looking thing that I had in the banner for this event. He started off being a
Japanese image board image of a bear called Kuma. Kuma is Japanese for bear. That they posted, and I don't really know what he was like as far as his character goes. But later on, when 4chan came about from 2chan, that image board, it took Kuma and turned him into the notorious pedo bear. Who, like, I don't know, how many of you guys know what pedo bear is? A couple. Okay, good. So anyway, from pedo bear, he came to Finland, and they turned him into this weird-looking Sprudo Spartan. And then they chopped his arms off and turned him into a gondola, which is like the head of a bear with just 2 legs, and that's it. So you have to be like an internet historian in a certain kind of way in order to get all of these references and to know the psychological impacts of a particular image. But what about original art? Like even Pepe the Frog started out as Pepe from Boys Club, which was that comic by Matt Fury. So that was an original creation and then ended up becoming a meme. The question is the meme market too full with content that can be registered by people as far as like, oh, this is from here and yada, yada, yada? Or is there room for artists to come up, put their original characters and original designs on the platform and have people react to them if they like them and use them as memes as well? Like, where do you guys see this whole interaction between original art and meme art?
I think it's a really good question. I am curious to see what's going to happen when people start marketing their own memes. Because the way I see memes right now is they're out there, they're free, they're like the popular art form of the 21st century because they are ubiquitous and they are anonymous. So you don't see artists signing their memes. You don't, I mean, maybe Banksy is the one, like, artist who was signing these memes. But you see a meme, somebody took something from the culture out there, gave it a spin, put some little punchline in it, puts it out into the world very generously without expecting to make any money, because right now, the marking of success of a meme is not money, but virality and acceptance, and also the capability of that meme to be riffed on and on and on, to be part of like this improvised conversation among all of us. And I think that's one of the greatest values of memes. I really agree with Theo. Not only that, the memes that we're seeing today probably have antecessors that we have forgotten about, but and the part that is funny, but also the fact that they are free and they are done in a spirit of sharing something with all of us without expecting anything in return, I think is really interesting. Now, I see the concern, like there are memes that are used for very nefarious purposes. Rare Pepe is an example of a very innocent little froggy that was co-opted by the alt-right, but then it was co-opted back by the Rare Pepe guys who actually turned it into an art form and a very successful, also financially successful enterprise. But the question for me is, if everybody starts monetizing, what is going, is the memes as we know, are memes as we know are still going to happen, or everybody's going to go, oh, I'm going to sign my meme and you have no permission to use my meme because I did it, which I would hate that to happen.
Well, I'll answer that real quick. What came to mind was that the memes are already heavily monetized. But not by the people who make them, it's by the platforms and the ad revenue. And there's a whole industrial system for the monetization of memes that rarely rewards the content creator, right? So I think fundamentally, kind of the point to drive home here is that the blockchain is the platform that enables content creators to be rewarded for the memes and the information that they disseminate primarily, right? So I think that's the big fundamental revelation. Then, like, everything we're doing here is kind of building layers on top of that capability. And how is that going to impact? Are people going to say, you can't use my meme? Well, that's the beautiful thing about memes, is they're permissionless by nature. The image is out there, and it's just the market that has scarcity, right? So if the market of a particular meme doesn't meet the demands that people need from that meme, a new market will emerge that represents that meme, right? So it's competitive. Memes are hyper-competitive by nature. So the markets to reward the content creators and society as a whole will also be hyper competitive to ensure the dissemination of memes in the best way possible.
I think you can look at how all of these things sort of take a life, you know, when you say one thing evolved into another thing, evolved into another thing. I mean, there are ways of applying that sort of the supply chain, if you will, of that. And that's really what, you know, one of the things blockchain allows you to do is like transfer, they show a record of where that ownership is transferred. And so you can kind of say, well, yeah, this was an image that was created on this date. One of the things that artists use today is the poor man's copyright. Right? If you write a song or if you make a piece of art, you can go on it, you can register that. And those types of registries and being able to really put your name on something for the rights of royalties or copyright or any other protections that you may want to have. And all of those things could very well be moved to blockchain. And I think that you'll see more of that take place. But when we're talking about exchanging value and what these tokens really mean, what the blockchain actually does is it says, it solves the notion of the double spend, right? If I have a song on my computer and I connect to Napster and then you download it, right? That's a peer-to-peer connection, but now we both have the song, right? So money can't work like that way. I mean, I can't have $1 and then just print another $1 and then hand you that $1 and we both have $1. So the transfer of that value has to be, committed from one person to the other. So the transferability then becomes really, part of the ownership. But it seems like with memes, you really need the virality of the thing for it to take off. And so how you're attributing the value back to the creator by just putting it out into the universe, there really needs to be, something that can, like you said, the platform in which it's being disseminated on. So, I mean, you see that with sites like Patreon, YouTube, things like that, where, artists can be rewarded for their work. But obviously, there's a whole new paradigm that's being set here, and there's going to be lots of potential for new types of platforms to emerge.
Now, one other way that this could be done is with curators. Now, it doesn't mean that if a certain meme is curated, or a certain artwork is curated, that people are online are going to see it and are going to be like, okay, this is going to be our next meme. But at least it'll increase visibility. So my question about the curations is, how do people trust the curators? What is it about the curators that separates them from any Tom, Dick, and Harry out there? So have at it. Oh, unless Theo, unless you wanted to add to the previous.
No, I'll go with the. I'll take curators for 1,000, please.
All right, sounds good.
That's a good question.
So do I get my face? Yeah, I've got the big face on the screen.
You're in.
Great. So yeah, the curation. So that you guys hit on the blockchain stuff. There's a simple question that comes up as far as digital artwork and blockchain tokens. Someone says, Theo, that's great. I've got the token, but I still have your eggplant Pepe, and I copied that picture, and I have that picture on my computer, and I don't care if I have the token. I say, well, that's great, but you don't have the token, so you don't have the complete artwork. So the token is actually part of the artwork itself, because I, as an artist, thought of this idea, and I even took the time to name the token. I took the time to figure out how much supply the token should be, and maybe I even did a little ritual when I made the token itself. So that's all part of the complete idea of the artwork. It's not separate from the artwork. Now, what part do the curators play in it? Well, what happens in blockchain is that so you have different problems than you have in the real world. For example, someone could make a token called Eggplant Pepe 2, or they could make a token called The Real Eggplant Pepe. So someone else has a token called The Real Eggplant Pepe and has the exact same artwork that I have, and I have mine. It says Eggplant Pepe, and we have the same artwork. So which one is the real Eggplant Pepe? Well, in the case of the curators could be the ones that verify and say that is the real one, because they would be, publicly known people, and they'd be, putting their trust on the line, saying this is the token and this is on the Block Explorer on the blockchain that goes with this artwork, and this is the artist that made that artwork, and that's what a blockchain art curator would need to do in this case. So, in my opinion, that's the functional part of the curation that you're going to need with a lot of this stuff.
But that is more authentication rather than curation in terms of style or, you know, like.
Sure. But I think I would do both. I mean, if I'm a curator, then I would need to know what I'm talking about, because I don't want to have the wrong stuff that I'm curating. So I'd have to authenticate it, and I would also curate it in the sense that I would only want the dankest stuff in my collection. I would only want really good stuff. So I wouldn't even begin to authenticate something that I don't like.
Well, think of a curation like a business, right? Because you have this new sea of blockchain-empowered information markets, right? And it could be overwhelming. And how do you decide, you know, what information goes? How do you decide what information you're even going to look at if there's too much to even, you know, think about going through the whole thing? So a curation is essentially some sort of business that, you know, parses that information into a meaningful set, a curation, and then markets that to the people who are going to look at it, right? So now the curation has to service the artists and the information providers and also the information consumers. And it needs to do that efficiently and competitively. And if it doesn't do it that well, there'll be another curation that offers a better service. And I think in the pre-blockchain era, the curation was the industry, like we call it the art industry, the information, data, whatever industry, right? Like the portals of truth that can, you know, use their influence to subsume both the artist and the consumer of information under them from their point of view. But the new blockchain paradigm is hyper-competitive curations that work to facilitate the most efficient connection between the information creator and the information consumer. Because if they don't do that, they're going to be outcompeted by someone else.
But who are these people?
Yeah, I was gonna ask the same.
Who are these curators?
Right.
Who anoints them, or how do they get to be curators?
Well, say like I'm a curator like by Eggplant Pepe, right? Now you could either listen to me or, you know, so far Eggplant Pepe has a pretty good, you know, reputation just from this this conversation here. So people will probably go home and buy certified Eggplant Pepe on the blockchain. But, you know, I can appoint myself to be a curator and anyone else can. It's just, do people want to follow my curation? So I need to provide a useful service, little relishing of marketing, but it's a useful service to connect the providers and the consumers of information.
So as a consumer of information yourself, you are curating already, just by consuming. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying the information, people who view information need to be efficiently connected to the people who make it, right? And the curator's job is to connect the two.
Because what I think about the curator, the figure of the curator in the art world, is actually that middleman that we're trying to get rid of here. So
right, but here's the thing. Looking at art is also a valuable skill, right? And that's why it exists in the first place, because there's so much art, so much information. We need people who just look at it constantly and know what's generally good or generally bad for whatever audience, right? So that's the new curation, is not what we're getting away from, but morphing into a business that serves both of the parties that they need to serve instead of being
I say
on
that,
top.
for instance, in the world of memes as we know them today, people are the curators. Memes that are super successful because they're super viral, because they make everyone laugh, are the most successful memes. And we all agree that they are the best memes. Memes that are shitty or that are evidently propagandistic, have 5,000 followers because nobody cares about them. So, that's the one thing that I keep thinking, the wonderful thing about memes is that it seems to happen almost automatically by a certain kind of instinctive popular consensus, and that is the wonderful thing. So if anyone who is tokenizing memes or monetizing memes can do that, cannot lose that kind of the power of something spectacular to be spectacular because we all decided that it is, without me having a special knowledge or something like that, that would be useful.
Yeah, I think that's really, really interesting as well. And now I just talked about curations as like people who specialize in that. But yeah, with the blockchain, I think another big innovation is they say we're browsing Reddit, we're browsing Facebook, and we hit a like or we hit an upvote or a downvote. You know, we're contributing to that information's relevancy, right? So that is a valuable action that we've undertaken. And with the blockchain, we can, commoditize the entire process of information propagation so we can all be considered curators, even on the micro level. Let's say, what if I upvote a post, if it's a piece of art or a meme or a WikiLeaks, and I see it early, and I'm like, oh, I want to get in on this information before it hits more people. Then maybe if I upvote it, then somehow I get a share in that information, or if I can invest in it directly because I'm betting on it going up in value because I consider myself, an early adopter of this information. I think it's just increasing the incentive system on all ends of information propagation to maximize truth, which is also maximizing memes and lols and dankness, at the same time.
That's a little bit like what Steam is doing, like the Steam platform, where upvoting and participating are incentivized by gaining currency.
I mean, for content creating in general, that's the platform is incentivizing that, for sure. But I think that you can also look at other platforms. For instance, Tribe, if you go to tribe.news, it's a company that I'm an advisor for. I mean, their whole platform is solving fake news. And so, fake news in the sense of memes, I mean, they're really one-to-one. And the way that we disseminate information now, the way that people pick up things, that's done with memes. And so how do we actually know what's real and what's not, I think becomes part of the issue of like, now, who do we trust? What do we know is going to be a good contributor to our culture? And not just that, but, the reputation of the source. And the way that they have it set up is the same way. They have a curator platform where they have readers, and then they have reviewers, and then they have curators on top of that. So it's sort of a three-tier system to validate, whether or not this story or this meme or whatever this bit of information may be, what's the relevance and what's the validity of that. And so that's really where I think that you can see the technology being used in a way that the world really needs right now.
I just want to point out really quickly that the blockchain is the ultimate platform for this because it's a time-stamped ledger. So when something's in the blockchain, it's there at a certain time, and you can check that it was there at that time forever. So the first time a piece of information is put onto the blockchain, you can view that as like the new proactive copyright. Because you can copy anything, but you cannot copy putting something into the blockchain. So I have valuable information if it's my art or anything else, a piece of news, and I'm the first person to enter it into the blockchain, then the market or people are naturally going to look backwards in time. What's the first time this information has entered the blockchain? Because that's the first time.
You're also staking your reputation on that.
Right.
And then that becomes, over time, just like an Uber driver, when you have them 5-star rating, hey, this guy's probably pretty good. Over time, the account that has the best reputation is going to be taken the most seriously.
Last question before we get to Q&A, and it's probably my favorite question. It's about the cultural divide that's currently in place, where we're talking about internet culture over here and the normies over here, where the two, like, memes definitely filter through to the mainstream as far as the memes, some of which have already been shown, like with that guy and the two girls. But what do you guys see happening in the future when it comes to this internet culture and how it's going to affect all of society?
Could you define the word normies for people in the crowd who don't know what it means and thus are one?
Okay.
Well, that just explained it.
In my opinion, a normie is somebody who has been, like, if they live in a certain place and they've been taught a certain thing and they're in a certain circle of certain people who all have the same opinion about everything. and they look at the same media, they go to they surf the same websites, and it's difficult to say exactly like who's a normie and who isn't a normie. I mean, maybe it's not difficult.
No, I mean, here's the definition I would provide.
Okay.
It's a little less denigrating. I think the term normie online is used kind of pejoratively in internet culture to refer to people who are not savvy of internet culture, right? I think that's kind of the foundation of the word.
That's actually a much better definition.
So like Lev explained the whole entire history of this meme, right? Which is not something a normie would be expected to understand, but because of that, he has an additional level of context on that information.
So basically, we're talking about normies versus nerds. Is that correct?
Yeah, you go.
Versus, like, basement dweller is the archetype.
But I think like internet culture, I mean, unfortunately, or we are all either victims or unwitting participants in it. Some people may know more about like blockchain, and some people may know more about these obscure things that happen within the people in the internet. But as regular people, our behavior has completely and irrevocably been changed by the internet. So I don't know that it really. I mean, what is the relevance if we are not even aware of the effects that the internet has had? You know what I'm saying? So some people know a little bit more about it, and that's kind of a niche of people. But all of them, all of us, whether we are normies or whether we are basement dwellers, we have all been affected by the way we use this thing.
Well, I would say, like, talking more specifically about like the normie shitposter divide, and it's specifically about this kind of occulted knowledge being held by essentially a priest class of shitposters who have kind of like understood these information flows for quite a long time, and now it's evidence that it precipitates into reality in an incredibly profound way. Just changing what people think, changing what people do, and now creating like multi-million-dollar markets for this type of information. So I would say we're post-internet culture because internet and culture have completely meshed, where it's just culture and it's just internet. So if you're more savvy in certain areas, of course, you will become a thought leader. So I think the case really is that we have a new class of thought leaders who were previously marginalized because it was in this kind of joke form information paradigm. But now that is an actual highly valuable skill that these platforms will empower even further. They will be amongst the head curators of all this information, organizing it and disseminating it in profitable ways because they know, they know what's going to catch on. They have an eye for these types of things.
I think that, at the base level, art is still in the eye of the beholder. And so, an artist can make a painting with a complete opposite intention than how somebody may interpret it. And I think that regardless of where you sit on the scale of understanding where these meanings originate, it's still going to have some emotional impact on you. And so that could very well traverse a lot of different cultures and societies, but things that actually become these viral sensations or these, UGC, phenomenons that take place, they can take on a life well beyond what their creator ever imagined. And so I think that once you put something out into the world, how the world responds to it is completely out of your hands.
Which is the beauty of memes. I think that's the beautiful thing. One of my favorite memes is the one where they took that Downfall movie about Hitler losing his shit. And so Hitler loses his shit, and somebody put these subtitles, and then I've seen it in Spanish. I've seen it about him being pissed off because there are no Bruce Springsteen tickets in New Jersey. I've seen it, and it goes on and on and on and on. And that is it's masterful, it's beautiful. And actually the company, Paramount, I think they tried to prevent this thing from happening. And everybody was like, are you insane? You're not getting that this is like or work of art almost as good as the original picture.
Like Theo said before, like, you know, all language fundamentally starts out really as pictures, and that's how we most efficiently convey information. So with this whole new mimetic revolution, it's really, we are co-creators in the new language, right? And if it's efficient, it's met with laughter and jokes, because aha, we're, you know, making new connections in our brain, and it spreads pretty effortlessly, right? So that's why I call it the yin and yang of this. There's, you know, the possibility for us to co-create an entirely new language for new platforms of meaning and human connection, and in another way to insert kind of mimetic language image-based viruses for, you know, to curate their own essentially like energy extraction from the system. And the more power we give decentralized to the content creators, then the more natural creative language we're going to have in our collective unconscious when the dust settles.
I wanted to say something about memes that is maybe a perception. I kind of wanted to hear about your thoughts about it. Is that memes target a certain time and they are effective on a certain context. So when I think about memes and when I think about art, I think I see the difference. You're saying, yes, memes are art, but I feel like art somehow doesn't have that problem of kind of just dying off as the hot topic dies. You know what I'm saying? So it kind of works in a conjuncture that is kind of narrow. I don't know what you guys think about that.
I think it's exactly like art. Some art that was super famous in its time has been completely forgotten today. Like, you know, like there are great like people who wrote books that were bestsellers in their time and now nobody reads them, or artists that were considered a big deal in the 19th century, and some became classics, but some not. So I think memes are a response to something that happens in the zeitgeist that is immediate, and that's why I think they're so powerful. Not only are they powerful because they communicate very instantly, as Theo said, but also they communicate instantly about stuff that's happening now. Yeah. But I think that maybe it'll happen that 25 years from now, we're going to look at some meme that is super hilarious today and people are not going to know what it's about. But that's the same. I think the same can happen with art.
Right.
You know? Well, it's kind of like entities.
Behind the curtain, the man is speaking.
What is going on?
Behind the curtain. That's good. It's yeah, put it back on me, man.
There you go.
Here I am. Okay, here I am. Yeah, I just wanted to say, yeah, I like that. What was it? The normie shit poster divide or something like that. That's pretty funny. But yeah, I think normie is for me, that means less. Doesn't mean necessarily someone that's not internet savvy. I think actually everyone knows a bit about the internet now. You know, even grandma, grandpa have phones and stuff with internet. So I think it has more to do with kind of trolling culture and not understanding that banter, that kind of stuff. And that's pretty much about what a normie is, because a normie is not going to get why some part of the meme is funny, maybe. So they're not going to be on that inside group of people that understand why the context, maybe. I think that's what normie is. And I want to ask, are you wearing an Anarchy Ball t-shirt?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So that's all. See, so that's also a meme. But I know Anarchy Ball, but that's a certain. Anyway, I also agree. Memes do have an important function of documenting a particular moment of history. So they do that very well, and that's kind of what you guys were talking about like the spur of the moment and all that kind of stuff. They communicate an idea that's going on right now. And I don't know, I think some artwork might have that issue and some might not. It really just depends on what it's doing. So I think that's a case by case.
Well, there's a subversive nature about memes as well. So for example, if you happen to grow up in a certain kind of family in a certain neighborhood, you're going to, again, be part of whatever culture is most comfortable, unless you want to be a rebel. Before, kids were rebels when they started listening to rock and roll and doing LSD. Today, they're going to 4chan. So as far as what kind of outcome is going to happen from that, I don't know. But it seems like there is a battle going on between what people are looking into versus what, let's say, MTV wants them to turn into. What do you guys think? Is there any legitimacy to this? Theo?
I'm sorry, I got distracted. Yes, there's a lot of legitimacy to that. I think the Anarchy Ball would agree. And in the end, what you have to do is head over to bitcorns.com and check out the eggplant farm.
Thank you. So unless anybody has any final words to add, I'm going to bring it out to Q&A.
I would finish with blockchain is the black swan of money. Memes are the black swan of culture.
I like that. All right, it's Q&A time, and if anybody thinks of leaving, there's going to be cookies and punch afterwards. So if you don't want to listen to the Q&A, at least stick around for that. But it's probably going to be a good Q&A anyway. So who has a question?
So many questions. Okay, fine. Is this working? Yeah. Okay. There's a lot of things going through my head right now. I'll just try to stick to one. I'm curious, particularly, I guess. Sorry, Dada. What's your name? Julie. Judy. Yes. Judy. Okay. That when you're working with artists, I mean, up until recently, and when I say recently, I mean in the past. I know digital art has existed for a while, but can someone create, if someone creates a drawing or a painting and they want to turn that into an image on your server, on the Dada platform, and monetize it through Bitcoin, what happens to the original work of art? If it still exists, can something that exists as a painting, if it exists as a painting or a drawing, and is it photographed and then put on Dada and monetized? So is everything strictly digital?
Well, I know it's kind of hard to, it's not hard to understand, but you know, if you have, let's say I take that painting, in order for it to be in Dada, I will have to redraw that painting on Dada with the digital tools on that. There is no uploading it.
So anything in the real world would be more like a preparatory. Would be considered, anything in the physical realm would be considered preparatory.
Well, yeah, I mean, you do a drawing, and you know, we have people who have drawn the Mona Lisa on Dada. They take like famous paintings and they do renditions of that. But Dada, you know, the platform, you draw with your mouse. You draw in the computer with tools that we give you inside the computer. So those drawings are made in Dada. That's why we know the provenance of all our art, because none of the art that is on Dada comes from outside of that. Now, people can go and make a painting on Dada of that painting, but that painting is still that painting, and the drawing in Dada is a drawing of that painting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I guess I'm just curious. I'm an art historian, I've been a curator, I'm an appraiser. So between there's a lot of aesthetic theory things, questions that are really, you know, come up with this. There's, you know, but essentially what, in terms of the market, the value, you know, when you're monetizing something digitally on this platform, but someone can copy it and make it print something that lives in the physical world, you know, that's just where I'm kind of.
That happens already anywhere.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think it's mutually exclusive at all. I used to sell wallpapers for cell phones, and along with ringtones and games and all sorts of stuff. And so we would do licensing deals with artists, and we would get, you know, the rights for digital reproduction, just like you would sell prints for anything else. We would offer credits, and so people would get a subscription, and they could use those credits, and they could download whatever they wanted. There's a really interesting company out of New York called Electronic Objects, and they make digital picture frames. And you can go on there, and there's so if you are an artist and you have paintings or drawings or prints, whatever it may be, you can upload those into their storefront, and then artists can then download those. I mean, artists, owners of the digital frame can download those as a collection, and then royalties can be paid back to the artist. And then what's really great about that is that, say all these picture frames in here were all digital, right? So I could go in and with my phone, I could change every one of them. I had one in my house. They're amazing. And so you can upload your own photos. You can, surf different types of artists, different types of genres of artists, and you can curate your whole house digitally. And so, Electronic Objects is the name of the company that I like, but there's lots of.
There's also one called Mural. They
do
something similar. It's like Spotify for art.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
But to answer your
Video is closed down, but
Oh, is it?
yeah.
if what worries you is the issue of rights, like let's say that like there's a lot of fan art in our thing, like it all is governed whether it's free use or all that stuff. But like for instance, can we monetize like somebody who did pictures of Heath Ledger as the Joker or something like that? Well, maybe the people from the comic are going to say you can make money out of this because it's like copyright, but it's fan art. But everything that is created by an artist as if they were drawing on paper, except instead of drawing on paper, they're drawing on the platform. So the IP belongs to them and it's their art. And when we put it out there, we're going to find ways in order to curate that with the community, to monetize it. Eventually, the artists are probably going to decide how many editions they want, what the price is going to be, and it's their art, so they're going to be making money of it.
To answer your question about if a physical object can be sold or registered in the blockchain. So in the case of data, we already established that it's not the case. But there are projects that are actually taking physical assets and they're being recorded and the provenance is being registered in the blockchain using like tags, for example, that represent the token on the physical object. And then every single transaction made on that object is recorded on the blockchain.
No, I understand.
So I'd like to offer a demo of that very quickly right now. So the watch that I'll come over and show it so everyone can see. But this watch I have is a rare Pepe watch, of which only 100 exists. So there's a digital asset component that's essentially the digital bearer bond that, sure, anyone could make their own rare Pepe watch, but if it's not done, if it's not within this original 100, which I can prove because I own the digital bearer bond of ownership for this watch. So essentially, it's like the Rolex of the future. You're not going to be wanting diamonds. You're going to be wanting abstract objects on the blockchain. We're going to try to show everyone.
It's all the blurry.
I see it, man. It's cool.
Oh. So yeah, my rare Pepe watch, of which there's only 100 in existence. It's the Pepe Cash watch, which is the currency used to buy rare Pepes, but it is also a rare Pepe. So is it art? Is it money? Boom.
All right, question from the right over there.
I just want to talk to your point or your question. The question of like existing art is like separate in my mind. I think what's happening is the creation of like new venues and new art made specifically for those new venues. And from a technical standpoint, it's correct, I think, to ask like, how is this token related to the art, if you have the art? I think what's happening here is like an attempt to create like a new social institution where, I mean, basically the artists are declaring that this token is a piece of my art. It's part and parcel to the art. So if you try to separate the token from the visual portion of it, you don't have the complete work. That's sort of, but it's largely in my mind like a social construct that's happening there. And it might fail, but I think that's what's happening.
Thanks, Lev. I was really curious about the part of the conversation that circled around this curation idea. Traditionally, at least in the art world, curators are looked at as an arbiter of taste, which is completely separate from what's called pop culture or what some people consider to be common. So there's really a class differential in a way where you're talking about people who are in the know about what is elite. and something that would be determined by a popular vote or by the market. And so it sounded like what you guys were saying was that with the blockchain and the sort of this free market competition idea, that the quote unquote curation would be just a popularity contest to see what got the most votes, which is not really the traditional definition of curation at all. So I'm curious about that concept and also about the kind of political aspect, whether a key part of blockchain and decentralization is in fact sort of an anti-elite backlash or a anti-establishment, power to the people or populism kind of politics.
Well, I think when we started talking about curations, I was originally talking about curations more as they currently exist, whereas there's certain people who have taste makers or use their taste as a skill to provide their own curation of information. So that can exist simultaneously with completely decentralized voting platforms, I think, and then the market will decide, for what type of information, what kind of curation do we want to go to.
We have a really interesting challenge in data because I think you have a really good point. We want to avoid the popularity contest. I mean, we need to figure out what are the collections that we're going to be issuing on data, what's the art that we're going to sell. So for that, we need a certain kind of curation. But the way that we decide is not only by what people like the most, but also because we have visual conversations. For instance, some of the criteria are, well, is it the first drawing that started a conversation? Is it a drawing in the conversation that kind of delivered a twist? Is it something that may not have total skill, but it's really imaginative or has a sense of humor? So that when we're talking about curation, it's not so much like only the power of like the masses, because we worry that if we curate only by what people like, people, for instance, tend to like hyper-realistic images. And we have a lot of really fantastic hyper-realistic images done in our platform. But why should they be, but there's other images that maybe are done with less skill, but with more ingenuity. So we are like thinking of devising a system, and we already have kind of a gamified system in which the curation has all these criteria. It takes all these criteria into place, and it's not just about people giving likes, because then we're going to be turning again into, it's like this balance between not turning into having like the curators who know everything, and also not like letting just be a popularity contest. And that's a really tough and interesting.
I want to add something in regards to that question. I'm really happy that you asked it. In this project that I'm directing, I'm having to deal with curation because there's other artists that are going to be inside this place. But we're also trying to build it in a decentralized way. And I feel that the idea of decentralization and curation, for some reason, there's like a mismatch that it's really hard to deal with. And yeah. I feel like all of us are kind of in the same problem.
So, I mean, I think that if you think about propaganda, for instance, right? Propaganda, it comes from sort of the top down, from the mountaintops shouting down at the people below, right? And I think that the way that we think about influencers, and the way that we think about, who are those thought leaders. And, in the media world, we have a terminology called the share of voice. And so whoever has the most share of voice is the loudest in the room, right? And brands use this all the time. Like, Super Bowl's on and Coca-Cola wants to buy all the ads. That way Pepsi doesn't get any, So that's what they call the share of voice. And that's what is used to influence, a group of people. One of the things that I've seen recently as a phenomenon is Sean Parker from Napster, who was one of the early investors in Spotify. He ran a channel called Hipster International on Spotify. And Hipster International ended up becoming a sort of a incubation bed for all of these emerging artists. And so many new artists have been discovered off of that one channel. And it's because Sean Parker had share of voice, because he was Sean Parker, that he was able to have all of those followers and be such a strong influencer on the platform. But Spotify has basically allowed for a lot of emerging artists to break out of the mold from traditional radio, whereas traditional radio is really just set around pop culture. How do you discover music that's right for you? I'm very into new modern rock and alt country and Americana and all kinds of genres that you just don't hear on the radio. And so, how do you find those? And it's really from those peer-to-peer connections. But what happens is that, and somebody who's run a content platform in the past, you'll know this by looking at the data. And people are lazy, right? There's really two types of people in the world. There's people who go look for information, and there's people that like to be fed information, right? And so the majority of the people out there are actually people that just want to be fed information. And so whoever has the most share of voice, when we talk about decentralized network, and, hypothetically it's all even, right?
Yeah.
But that's not how you're really able to reach the masses. And so memes actually become this connective tissue, because it becomes this sort of consensus of like, we agree. It's funny when you said laughter, because the act of laughter is actually a biological consensus. When we're all in a room and we all laugh at something, it means we're all on the same page. We all agree with each other. It's actually one of the most, from an evolutionary biology's perspective, it's actually one of the most basic things that we have as a species. So, I think that the ability to reach an audience by starting off, with that sort of emotional context is a really interesting phenomenon itself. But you're never going to really, I think, be able to avoid how share of voice can be adopted or manipulated.
I want to use my share of voice. I don't think there's a problem with having a centralized curation in a so-called decentralized project, because I feel like I'm echoing, sorry. Because the decentralized part is the transfer of ownership and the ability to send it to whoever you want, whenever you want, and nobody can reverse that transaction. That's the decentralized part. If I'm a curator, then my curation is also my vision, maybe my artwork in itself. So I don't always think that I need to decentralize that. Maybe I want to have 100% dictator curation of this particular project, and that's just how that project is, and that's fine. That's my way of doing it. And all of the voting mechanisms that are going to use blockchain don't necessarily prevent the share of voice being dominated by people, because you can buy and sell votes, you can influence people to vote a certain way, et cetera, et cetera. So the game might be different, but in the end, you still have that. So I don't think there's a problem with saying, hey, this is a centralized curation, this is my idea, this is my concept, but we're using decentralized tools to make the artwork.
Thank you, Theo. And Isabel, you also had a second part of the question, right?
I wanted to answer that.
About
yes, I think that a lot of the impulse is really anti-establishment. It's basically the decentralization allows you to get rid of a lot of gatekeepers, or at least to imagine models where the gatekeepers are not so formidable and so insurmountable. So there's a lot of platforms like yours, or like Singularity TV, or people who are trying to do movies in a way where they don't have to scale the walls of Hollywood in order to get heard, or even us, artists that, Dada is kind of a platform for people to come and enjoy drawing. One of the big problems that we have explaining to people is that you're not going to go into Dada and immediately start monetizing, because we are a visual conversation platform through which eventually we funnel some of that art into a marketplace. But Dada is a place also where artists come to meet each other, to be together. Somebody's in South Africa and somebody's in Peru, and all of a sudden they feel like they know each other. And this is quite revolutionary. This technology, which is just regular internet, is allowing us to do stuff. But the idea of decentralizing, how we meet, the places that we meet, who we meet, I think blockchain helps us imagine a world where we don't need all the structures that are in place, that we can create our own structures.
It's not anti-establishment, it's post-establishment.
Thank you.
Hi.
Yes,
Judy?
Yes.
Yeah. Back to the other lady's question about photographs. That was my first thought too. But if you say you're doing something, it's a whole different from doing it on paper or canvas or any other medium. So if you don't have something exactly the way you want it, is it going to go through anyway, or can you stop it? And is it like a workshop? Or?
No, actually, it's just like when you draw in the computer, before you can erase, you can go back, you can make it as perfect as you want. You have colors, you have a tool set that is very basic, but yeah, you can erase. Actually, our founder didn't want people to be able to erase, and I said, no, you have to, because she was like, let them make mistakes are interesting. I was like, you're gonna kill people. So we, yes.
They're gonna kill you.
Yes, exactly. But like, you have the nuclear option, like when you're ready, we ask you, do you want to post this? Are you sure you want to post this? And when you press that button, it'll be posted. Once you post it, it's out there. But before you do, you have the option to save it, to come back to it later, and to erase as many times as you want.
And you said something about people meeting other people from different places on it. How does that happen?
Well, it's a social network, so it's imagine like Facebook, except instead of seeing somebody's picture with their nephew and like whatever, you see a drawing that they did, and so you can respond to the drawing that they did, and that person may be in China or in Russia or here in the United States. And there we have like places where people can talk to each other, but mainly it's a drawing site.
Show up anonymously?
You have to sign up, and we encourage people to use, if not their own name, or at least like their artistic name, because you want your art to be associated to you. So, some people use pseudonyms, or nom de plume, but we actually, you can use whatever artistic name you want.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we have time for one last question. So a gentleman over there.
Yeah. So my question is pretty much for anyone in the panel who might be able to answer it. It's about copyrights. I've been hearing kind of a bit about it with regards to like blockchain and and memes, the distinction between memes and art and whatnot. And I just want to know what, if anything, any predictions of what copyright laws may look like as blockchain technologies continue to develop, as well as memes becoming bigger. And as as a lot of us already know, many of the biggest memes do kind of sample off of popular culture and content that which may already be copywritten. And so I'm just curious of any predictions.
I think the blockchain, we entered like the post-intellectual property era. So the old model was ideas as property, right? But now we have to look at it through the mimetic filter of the constant evolution and actually the global co-ownership of all ideas. So my version of what I see, well, just how I call it, is proactive copyright is the new model, meaning if you're essentially the first person to the blockchain with a certain information, that's your bearer bond of validity. And of course, maybe if you stole it and people found out, then they'll credit the author after the fact, but that will be a group consensus mechanism. And as more and more businesses are decentralized on the blockchain, sure, this traditional copyright infrastructure will try to stomp them out, but it's absolutely impossible. So the new way is by proactively putting your information out there onto secure networks and then figuring out, what's the new model based on this and not on like a closed garden IP type system.
So the real, I guess, the root of the question there is what's the governance of all of that, right? Because anybody can say, okay, I'm going to post this on the blockchain. Now what, right? How is it enforced? How is it? So that gets to that's the a little bit deeper of a question. I mean, right now you have the copyright office is handled at the post office. So same thing for filing a patent. Those are federal authorities, right? It's done through the federal government. And so how we look at the future of governance, and there's lots of, talk in this industry around startup societies and sovereignty in different nation states and creating new nations, and there's all sorts of things out there that are sort of rising out of this whole movement of a decentralized economy. But I think that, when you talk about here in the United States, it would be an indicator that just like signing up for a poor man's copyright, where I think that you're showing the intent that this is yours, and you're it's like sending yourself a certified letter that says, yes, I did this, right? And that might be upheld in court. There's no I don't think that there's a statute or there's any sort of ruling on that so far, so there's not really a way to sort of say, yeah, this has been set as a standard. But I think that in the future that probably will happen in some form or another. Patents. I mean, there's a project that I'm aware of called Loki, where it's basically putting patents on the blockchain. And but again, one of the reasons why cannabis companies can't copyright their trademarks and logos is because it's not legal at the federal level, and so you can't copyright something that's not federally legal. And so I think that you're going to run into some issues with so how this stuff is actually governed or enforced. But it certainly couldn't hurt, and especially for signing up for like if you wrote a song and you sent yourself a certified letter saying I wrote this song, or you go to an online resource and you fill out for a poor man's copyright, that doesn't stand up in court. So there is a precedent for that. But yeah.
All right, that's it. Thank you very much. There should be behind the curtain some cookies and punch. There we go. It's there.
Let me do it.